Welcome to East Coast DNA. We have another episode where we're going to feature some information on Halifax Urban Folk Festival. Today's guests, we have Troy Arseneault. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Troy, I knew of you, I guess, more so than knew you, originally from early days with Alert the Medic when I would have considered them a Stellarton-based band at the time, but you may have considered them a Halifax band at the time. I'm not sure. So,
Yeah,
were you Halifax originally, or did you migrate to Halifax from another area like many, many musicians?
yeah, a New Brunswick transplant.
Okay.
Yeah. I was living in St. Andrews, New Brunswick before moving to Halifax. I was born in Campbellton, New Brunswick.
Okay.
Uh, had spent some time between the Campbellton, St. Andrews living in Ontario and bouncing around Moncton and other little areas, just trying to find myself in those younger days. I went to college in St. Andrews after I figured out, something to do. And after seeing that musical surgency that was happening there in
Hmm.
early 2000s, led me to Halifax from there. And that was 2004. So yeah,
Yeah.
geez, been 20 years now since I've been living here.
The
Wow.
timeline for that to kind of it's funny because I was always into indie bands and alternative bands, and what your career led to is right up my alley for what I would have been following. But it's also the era when I started having children and
Aha.
started being a little bit more detached from it. So I remember when you joined Alert the Medic, but I don't know anything about the details on how that all happened. Like I know a little bit about the other guys in the band, but you
Yeah,
were the
I was
one
a
that I didn't
fan.
know. Okay.
I was a fan. Honestly, when I moved here, I stumbled across the band. Might have been like a compilation disc or something I had found
Okay.
from Music Nova Scotia or ECMA back then. And then I was heavily in the promoting shows when I got to town. And I think it was like ECMA 2006, perhaps. It was in
Hmm.
Halifax. I put together a note case, and there was a venue called the Peel Pub on
Okay.
Spring Road back in the day. So they gave me that room, and I had stacked, I think, like 8 bands a day for like 3 or 4 days in a row. And one of the headliners on that night I had booked was Alert the Medic.
Uh,
And really, I think I was just trying to fill slots at the time, and I plugged them in, and then got to see like, holy shit, this band's great. Then I ended up getting booking the Seahorse eventually after that, and had them in the room many a times. And I remember being, well, I've been in bands pretty much my whole life.
hmm.
At that time, I wasn't. I kind of took a break from the band I was in called Wheeler that had started in 2000. And I remember thinking I wasn't really going to be in bands anymore. I was like, this band thing is hard. But I always in the back of my mind, I used to kind of always tell myself, if I was in any other band that was based out of here, I'd like to be in Alert the Medic. That'd be a fun band to be in. And then it turned out we were all at the ECMAs one year. I think it might have been 2007 in Fredericton. It would have been the following year, and the guys were up for a couple of awards, but
Hmm.
weren't showcasing. And I thought it was really interesting how they weren't showcasing, and we all ended up in a late night suite. Back then, you used to pile in hotel rooms and party till 6 a.m. And we found ourselves in a circle in the center of that room chatting, and me kind of fanboying out on them and saying and finding out that they didn't have a guitar player anymore.
Hmm.
And I kind of just threw my name out. I was like, if you guys need someone, I definitely would love to throw my hat in the mix. And I think probably another year went by, and I ended up getting a phone call from them because they had John Landry from the Stanfields sitting in with them for a bit.
Yeah.
And so then John had recommended to chat with me because I think then John was really planning to ramp up the Stanfields around
Hmm.
then. So yeah, kudos to John Landry, I guess, for putting his head out for me. And I was just also a fan of John Landry. We kind of
Yeah.
all just became real good friends then because I think all of us were just sort of supporters of each other's projects at the time. And, it was kind of cool to think back when you go, everyone was really out for everybody's best interests um, back then, no matter what we were doing. Everybody had each other's back, even
Yeah.
though, it was cool. So yeah, that's kind of a long story of how I ended up in Alert the Medic. It wasn't, you know, I always felt like I was brought into the Stellarton crew, You
Yeah,
say that,
yeah, for sure.
that the New Glasgow, Pictou County, that whole area really feels like home because of that band. Um, will you say like, are we a Halifax-based band? We're always a Nova Scotia-based band.
Yeah, fair.
I think, Jesus, we were traveling to New Glasgow in Stellarton to rehearse probably the first couple years I was in the band because
Hmm.
Matt still lived down there, and I think Ryan was still tight and close down there. Like we get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, drive down there for 8 a.m. rehearsals, and get back in the city before we had to go to work. So arguably, we're
Yeah,
probably more of a home-based band there than we were ever in Halifax.
for sure. So in the promotions world then is what kind of kept you in the city.
Yeah, I always like finding new things,
Hmm.
I always loved putting things on stage. I guess it became from wanting to be a musician and growing up in such a small town that you had to do everything to showcase your music. I come from a town in northern New Brunswick that has like 6, 7,000 people.
Hmm.
There's no music industry there. So we had to build everything we wanted to do from what we used to watch on TV.
Yeah.
No, that bug always carried on to me. I kind of like waving people's flags when I can, and I like finding things that I want to share with everybody else. So arguably, the promoting bug will be with me longer than anything else. Um, I think that's where a true passion is.
And now you had mentioned booking for the Seahorse. So was that the Argyle Street location or
Yeah,
yeah.
the original location. Yeah, I worked for Victor Siprick for, oh geez, 2007 to 2014. Um, Mainly the Seahorse Tavern, but we did a lot of growth up in the shoe shop.
Hmm.
We used to do jazz nights, which eventually has grown into huge nights at the local, which is, where eventually everything moved to the Marquee building
Yeah.
um, through those years. And yeah, I had my hand in the Marquee as well for the last couple of years of working for Victor, but it was such a fun position to be in and developing. Like we developed a lot of great things. New Music Tuesdays started. Um, you know, we can go through the list of bands that started on that stage from, Stanfields of the Town Heroes to Christina Martin, bringing Campbell and Johnson to, geez, we could,
It's so
um,
iconic. It
it's
probably
it's
like
wild when
yeah,
I go through the list of who started in there. Mo Kenny, you know, Jesus, T. Thomason, um, like Molly Rankin, that's now in Always.
yeah.
I remember she was like 14 years old or something, and this lady Heather Francie brought her in to kind of, we're signing underage agreement forms to get people to do 30-minute showcases. But
Hmm.
yeah, the onslaught of artists that came through those New Music Tuesdays were wild, and they still have careers today. So it's yeah, it's that'll always be something I'll always be super proud of. That scene was really cool. When people used to call Tuesdays the new Fridays, you
Yeah.
know, everyone took Wednesdays off.
That's fun.
There were some good days. Yeah.
And how does that I mean, there's a timeline that you could probably talk for hours about, but how does that relate to what you've been doing this past year with the basement being that that's the former location of the Seahorse?
Yeah, that's just kind of a coincidence,
Yeah,
just the people who bought it and opened it up had reached out and knew I knew the room initially,
sure.
and kind of looked for some help wherever I could. And I've always done that for them.
Hmm.
And you know, my wife and I had our own restaurant from 2014 to 2019. We shut that down in 2019. We opened, and then COVID hit. I had various projects on the go that all sort of just some kind of trickled on. A lot of them just kind of stopped. But last year I was sitting around trying to figure out what I was going to do coming into 2024. And that's when we kind of came up with the idea of Arsenault Group Entertainment, with the focus on let's develop and promote again. Let's get back to the basics of where you started and why you were here. Um, the basement offered me a platform to start seeing who was out in the scene again. So
Hmm.
that's where the basement sessions sort of formed from. Being trying to have an avenue that I could kind of find out what's going on in the local community again in the scene because let's be frank, I'm 43 now.
Hmm.
Um, I don't really know what many 20-year-olds are doing at this time, and how do you find that out without, you know, being that weird old dude
Hmm.
that, I
No,
remember
I
when I was
know it well.
20.
I've been up in the city quite a bit this past year, so like I'm doing kind of the same thing, except I'm not
Yeah.
promoting it. I'm sitting off to the side with a camera or phone, and
Well,
but yeah,
you're doing some good work. We need that. But it was trying to figure out how I can open up a door so the younger generation could kind of say, okay, this guy does have a history in this and he does care and it's worked. We did it monthly up to September, or sorry, the end of August.
hmm,
And with now knowing what's here, we're dialing it down to more of like a quarterly event. So
sure,
the next one will be in December and so on. We're going to make them bigger runways, bigger bands being a part of it to help the smaller bands that necessarily don't have the draw they need to grow. So we've been able to kind of put together a little bit of a plan of attack. So that's where the basement be able to. It's just kind of nice that it's back in that room where I sort of started doing that stuff
yeah,
almost 12 years ago. Um, but yeah, it's been fun. We brought in Boy Golden this year, and
yes.
as of what we're going to talk about next is sort of the kind of the phase of where we're at with the Arsenault Group, which is acronymed AGE Presents.
Yeah,
Ironically.
no, actually, to that point, I do want to have a conversation with you about Trout,
Uh,
but I'm thinking that with your two careers both being in music, that we could probably do a full episode about just your musical path, like how you went from New Brunswick to Halifax, a little bit more about Arithmetic and what's happening with Trout, because I know that there's music out there. I've seen you a couple times now perform. So I
mm.
before we get into Huff talk, is Trout going to be an ongoing band that people can pursue in the next year, like 2025?
Yeah, you'll see some stuff in 2025. As pursuing, it's really about as much as I want to pursue with Trout.
Sure.
That's sort of the premise of that
Yeah.
project. Um, it's basically a project that allows me to kind of pull the reins back on all the noise that artists have to do and chase
Hmm.
to just try to make attention to themselves. Be it, trying to figure out how to get streams or trying to figure out how to create enough content and swallow content. I've been a part of many projects where that is, and Trout is my escape from that,
Hmm.
which it's nice to see it somewhat resonating a little bit that like people starting to make sense. Okay, I get where he's coming from with this. Like that, it's very minimal. Like people are like, Trout, well, how do I find it online? How do I find it? It's like, well, there's one place. You find it on Bandcamp,
Hmm.
and that's the world it's gonna live in. And I chose that world because I find it's the most artist-friendly world. It's an art, it's a world that you can create revenue, you can create, and it's not something that sure people have to sign up and follow. And maybe I'm alienating myself from future listener, but at the end of the day, it's for me. Like I write
Yeah.
music and I want to write music on all sorts of levels. If I'm writing rock or punk or country, all of it finds a home. And if it doesn't find a home, it'll find a home in Trout.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what it's for. I've also never had the opportunity to have a platform where I can actually, as I say, just yell at you for 45 minutes and let you know how we're feeling. Um, I needed to do that. And that's what that muscle is. It's stretching that out and flexing that a little bit just so I have that outlet for myself. And lucky
Sure,
enough, I have a great rhythm section with me, and that power trio vibe translates it. Um, yeah, but there'll be some more stuff coming down the pipe. It's I'm just very conscious of what I'm chasing with it and why
sure,
I'm doing it. And the shows that I do, I'm doing them because I care about the bigger picture of the event I'm at. I care
yes.
about, there's something that bigger than the music is kind of where it is. Trout, it's a lifestyle.
Well,
Yeah.
and you obviously take that kind of sensibility back into your promotions world as well. Like you've already said, like on different ways that you're trying to connect to know what people are looking for. But with the Halifax Urban Folk Festival, the bands and shows that you're contributing into this lineup, I'm very excited by them as a music fan, but you didn't necessarily go and grab like the top 10 bands and try to fit them into your venues. You found bands that fit the venues that do need that little bit of exposure out there. Like it's a great lineup. I'm aware of the bands that are on there, but they are bands that need to foster those groups. If a band comes down from Montreal and plays in Halifax, they're going to have a fan base that comes out to the show, but they're going to also want people that maybe haven't heard them to show
Mhm.
up at those shows and be new fans. They want to leave our region, bringing new fans back with them into their regions.
Mhm.
So maybe if you want to give a rundown on, there's three different shows at three different venues.
Mhm.
So if you
Yeah.
want to give a rundown on what you have coming up, maybe
Well,
we
yeah,
can get
well,
some people out there.
I'll start with the Thursday, October 3rd. That's at the basement.
Hmm.
We have Rankin MacInnis and the Broken Reeds headlining, which is, kind of a full circle. Rankin and I have known each other for many years. Rankin was just starting out in the scene back in 2009, 10-ish, I would
Hmm.
say. My dates are all over the place, but it was about then. And he had an idea for a concept, a band called Party Boots, and he wanted to start an event. And I always really loved Rankin's energy, and I didn't really know nothing about him. I really rolled the dice on the fact, A, I loved his energy, and B, well, he's from Cape Breton and he says he's a musician, so he's probably good.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a given. And yeah, he started to build this thing with 10 people in a room, and his tenacity over the years was so impressive to the fact that now I went down to the Marquee last winter for a winter warmer session that he hosts, and he's bringing 800 people into the Marquee on a Saturday afternoon from 3 o'clock till 6 in the evening for like 8 weeks in a row.
Hmm.
That's just blows my mind. But that all began on Argyle Street on that stage in what is now the basement, which was the Seahorse. So when I started programming and I said, okay, I got the room, what should we do? I reached out to Rank and said, listen, wouldn't it be awesome for us to kind of do a show together again and bring you down into that room and, small, intimate crowd? And he was like, absolutely, let's do it. And the beautiful thing is now he's writing new music. He's got new music coming out. It's original. So he's going to be showcasing it in that room. And so there's this full circle of like, oh, cool, it has to be done.
Yeah.
Um, I'm support act is an act named Jamie Fontaine.
Hmm.
He's going to kick off a 30-minute set. I do have my hands involved with Jamie in wanting to bring him to the people because he's got a beautiful voice. I've known him for quite some time, and his new music right now is brand new. Like just out of the gates by weeks. And I just think people are going to be really taken back by the show, the professionalism. It's new country, it's country vibe, but it's got, true roots to it, like good story, beautiful voice. Yeah, I'm stoked on that bill. They're both Cape Bretoners, but they also it's almost like two factions of Cape Breton. I don't think Jamie is well known within that form of Cape Breton and
Hmm.
vice versa. So, yeah, it's a Cape Breton style musician evening. And yeah, we're stoked to kick off our three shows on that night. Then Friday night we have NOBRO. That's the big one at the Marquee for us. I've been a big fan of NOBRO for the last few years. They are one of the bands when I said if I ever got back into promoting shows and doing stuff, I want to do them. And
Hmm.
so I really spent the year trying to make that happen, trying to build the relationships between the agent, the bands, the management, the things you got to do. Because it's not like you just pick up a phone and say, I want this band. And they're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't happen like that. So there is a song and dance that is done. I I had the opportunity. The timing worked out great. The agent accepted it. Now it's about the people in Halifax coming out and taking it in. The research I've done feels like the show's going to do really well. I think the buzz is there. The support act, customer service, is one of the coolest new buzz bands going on in Halifax right now.
Hmm.
Uh, they need to be on this bill. And then Hooch is opening up. They currently are signed to a similar label, family label as NOBRO out of Montreal, which I
Okay.
had no idea when I booked the show and promoted that even Hooch, their EP, uh, Catherine from NOBRO actually sings on one of the tracks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that we could see some cool stuff happening that night between the two bands.
Hmm.
I know NoBro is really excited about having Hooch on the bill and customer service. So I think it's going to be a smashy, sweaty punk rock night. Like and I think the musicianship and the showmanship in NoBro is going to take people back. Like they're going to be like, oh wow, which in the end we love to do because that pushes our bands, it pushes our scene.
Hmm.
Like so our scene can say like, oh wow, this is the level we need to be starting at. Hopefully it lights the fire. Not to say they're not already doing it. It's just nice when it all comes together.
Oh,
Uh,
exactly.
make it happen.
And that
And
No Bro specifically, I just saw their part of their performance, or maybe the full performance from the Polaris Prize Awards the other day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like it was only like a 6 or 7 minute clip, but it felt like I watched an entire performance because they were just giving it. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to be able to go out and see them. So
mm,
hopefully you get lots of tickets sold and everyone fills that venue up.
yeah. Well, we do too.
Mm,
It's not Halifax is just known for slow pre-sales. That's kind of the thing. And
hmm.
then promoter, you always kind of get, you don't want to get caught up in that. It's a whole other segment of conversation. But yeah, I feel the venue is going to have the people in it needs to be. Everybody seems really excited about it. Um, and we've done our job at this point. So let's fill the room and give the girls a good Halifax welcoming. As you mentioned, like Polaris Prize shortlisted nominee act, like there's a lot of people on that list, and to be whittled down to the short list is something to be proud of. Um,
Absolutely.
then yeah, so that's that night. And then Saturday night is the all ages show. And I
Hmm.
brought this into effect because as I was saying, like being, in my early 40s now and really not wanting to be detached from what is new, I've been paying attention to the all ages scene for the last year or so. And Rad Storm has this beautiful thing happening down on Gottingen. Roam around there between 6 and 9 o'clock on a Friday, Saturday night. There's 100 kids at least milling around the area, in and out of the venue. They're body surfing, they're moshing, it's not the date, but it brings you back to a time where like our generation started playing
Yeah,
music. It reminds me of when I was their age, going to the you know town halls or the church basements or wherever we would find a place to make some noise. They're doing it, and it's beautiful. So I ended up finding this band Sig Sauer within that world. And if you're a fan of the Nirvana Bleach era, that you want to follow these kids.
Hmm.
Currently working with them on getting their first record together. Don from the Motor League is going to be producing their first EP.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's we're excited. It's going to be fun. And so I just needed to get them on this bill. I thought Huff had an opportunity to reach out because they already do an all ages songwriters circle on the Sundays. But a part of my plan working with Mike on the festival was me being able to bring my stylistic genres and venues to the festival outside of the singer-songwriter
Hmm.
realm. So the Radstorm is a great setting for it. Sig Sauer is a great band for it. A band called Fluke is opening up as well. So that show I think is going to be a given. It's a small room, capacity about 100 and 110 people, but it's going to be a good time down there. It should be interesting, and I'm just happy that the all ages and those bands are a part of this billing so that their name is starting to get out to more.
Yes.
But it's funny. I took Evan from Sig Sauer like down to the basement to see a basement sessions, and he had never been in that room before.
Hmm.
They've never. It's funny talking with some of these kids who are just turned 19 and they don't know where to go. They're like, "Oh, I've never been to the Seahorse before."
Yeah.
Or and you bring them and just seeing them, it's like you kind of forget. It's like, yeah, there's a moment in all our lives where we do that stuff for the first time. And
Yes.
you kind of forget about it when it actually starts to encompass your life and it's not, it's all the time. So there's a future there for them all. And I think that with Mike allowing us to do this, it's going to open up more doors for that scene that's on Gottingen to find a home over the next few years. No.
Yeah, hopefully. And I mean, that's kind of a message too to anybody that's listening to this is that you need to go out there and go to these shows so that they can build. So that in the future years, there might be two nights of all ages shows, or there might be a few different bands mixed into the mix there too. Like, so we need to support these events so that we can support
100%.
the bands that we want on these bills too. So that is really important. And a lot of these bands that you're mentioning, we've had a few bands that came up through Radstorm that are now fairly well established in HRM, and bands like Customer Service are getting a footprint outside of our region while still being a, primarily a Halifax-based band. They're starting to get a footprint in areas like Ontario, and we're starting to get, like, to your point there too. I didn't know the connection myself, but with Hooch and NOBRO, that's given us a little bit of a footprint in the Montreal area, and that's only helpful for other bands that are coming up in our region in the future because it enables us to do tours, and
Yeah.
then it gets a bigger fan base so that we're Canadian based bands. Even though I talk about East Coast, I'm a Canadian music fan. Like I like all of it. So it is nice to see exposure heading west and then a little bit of the west bleeding over to the east. And it's gonna help us long term develop new musical stylings and bigger fan bases. So it's really important. I really appreciate that you're putting the effort into doing it because I know both you and Mike, what you do isn't easy and there's a lot of risk. You could definitely find easier ways to make money to get by.
Well,
So
I
it's
say it's easier ways to spend money.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah, I none of us I think are in this for making money because
yeah,
we would have done for ages ago. It's but yeah, no, it's thanks. I appreciate that. But back to your point on the routing and the touring, that's something that needs to be built again in this country.
yes.
There was a really great routing system that kind of started to fall apart a bit around 2014,
Hmm.
15. Um, Seeing it and dealing with it firsthand, because I was in bands touring east to west from then to 2019. Like I saw how the venues started to get smaller. how the promoters started to disappear, how everything just started to get a little smaller, and then COVID hit and
Hmm.
locked everyone in. But one thing that we did in the East Coast, and we always do, we always know how to take care of our backyard.
Hmm.
And we've done a really good job post-COVID doing that. Like we have a beautiful scene happening in Atlantic Canada right now,
Absolutely.
arguably the best in the country. And people across the country see it because they're emailing me trying to get in and trying to
Hmm.
get so we're doing a really good job at that. I think the next step is kind of how you're saying those connections, like bands like Hooch and NOBRO, making those that's going to start to build again, I hope. And
Hmm.
it would be nice to get to a point where a developing band could play 12 to 15 dates across the country and have it viable. Maybe not
Hmm.
financially viable right away, but at least worth it because you're growing something. You're
Yeah.
growing a market again. You're growing a fan base. You're growing reoccurring fans, um, which is a really hard thing to do in this climate.
Hmm.
Really, people consume so much so fast. So it's my focus though at this point, it's like I kind of stopped worrying about the Torontos and the New
Hmm.
York, the bigger cities and what they're doing, and really just focusing on what we have around us and worrying about the backyard. Because I
Yeah.
think, geez, just last weekend, we had over 20 some thousand people in Charlotte or in PEI, sorry, and then in New Brunswick for Harvest, and then there was the shindig in Halifax, all happening at the same time.
Yeah. That was
I
impressive.
mean, that's impressive, man. Like that this for a little part of the country where everybody thinks that we don't have enough to support. You hear from
Yeah.
management agents all the time in bigger city, well, just not enough support out there, not enough support. I don't know. Take a look at what happened last weekend, and we're talking about nearly three different genres of
Yeah.
music, some paralleling, and some
Sure,
crossing over.
there's some overlap, but we're able to go out there and we have the numbers and we like I mean money's tight, but we have the numbers and we do have the money to get out there. You got to do something.
Yeah, people are doing it. They're spending it on their own, and with not being forced into it. So
Yeah.
maybe we're just a big headliner community. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, let's get out there and get some tickets sold for HUFF, and we'll see what kind of numbers we can get for some of these independent bands too, because
Well, that's the
I
goal.
really do think that's a good lineup. So I'm hoping we get the numbers out there so that we can have more and more of that in the future.
Oh man, I appreciate your time so much.
All right. Thank you very much, and I'll be up there too, so I will see you at HUFF.
Awesome. Thank you.
It was the summer, and it felt like the end, but I didn't want to be just another ex